وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بتقواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها صدق الله العلي العظيم.
صلى على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد
If you all can come forward.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعن الله الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. Respected scholars, elders, brothers and sisters, on the occasion of the 7th day of the month of Muharram and the 8th night, first of all, I want to express my condolences to our living Imam, the Imam of our time, on the martyrdom anniversary of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And my condolences to all of you. May Allah reward you for your good intentions and for the efforts you've taken in attending this majlis. And for those of you who have contributed in some way towards this program, whether it be through volunteering, whether it be through cooking, whether it be through contributions, the many different activities that take place in order to host these programs. We ask Allah Ta'ala to make your reward even more, and may He bless you and your families and your marhumin for all your efforts. As a means of attracting Allah's special attention to this gathering and the attention of the Imam of our time, let us all recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, the topic that we had the honor to be able to consider over the last number of nights has been a reflection on the me culture, or the all about me culture. And from the beginning we said that Imam Hussein alayhi salam's message was one where he was calling people to follow the path of truth, which is only found in the worship of Allah. Being obsessed with oneself is directly opposite with being attached and devoted to Allah. And when somebody is obsessed with themselves, it has effects in their personal life, it has effects in their family life, it has effects in society. And one of the causes of the downfall of a human being, of a family, of a society, is when they turn from the worship of Allah to the worship of the self. So over the last number of evenings, we've looked at different ways that the me culture has spread and may be affecting some of us. You know, inshallah, all this is for other people, but sometimes some of it's for us as well. So whether it be, for example, the idea of relationships, which is what we were covering recently, or the concept of gender, right? Or the concept of being attached to the material world, all of these has implications when it comes to what is our focus, right? When we're in a me culture, it can definitely affect us and pull us away from where we should be. In America, we have this concept of the American dream. I don't know if you've heard of this expression before, the American dream. Whether or not you've heard of it, definitely it's affected you, because that's something that America was founded on. This idea that every single person can achieve their dream of personal success. And America was seen from the beginning of when it was established, it was the land of the free and the home of the brave. Anybody could come from anywhere. They could migrate here and they could lead a decent life and they could be happy. They could find success. And back then, you know, a couple hundred years ago, when America was being formed, there was a sense that this American dream is something that should affect everyone. Everyone should have opportunity for it. One of the sad things that's happened over the years is that that idea of it being as a country as a whole, it's sort of, you know, gone in the background. And what's more important is at an individual level, that am I able to achieve this dream that I have for my success? Now, when we look at ourselves and we say that what are we striving for? You know, for many of us, you know, by the grace of Allah, by the mercy of Allah, this country has given us many opportunities. Right? If we compare our situation here to our situation, if we were in many other places in this world, we're safer, we have more opportunities, right? We are able to freely conduct our business, we're able to freely practice our religion in many respects, and there's a lot of good things and opportunities that have come our way. But what I want to talk about this evening is this concept of what is our dream? And when we have this all about me culture, how can it be limiting in terms of being able to achieve success? So what I want to do here is I want to quote an ayah from the Quran. I've actually mentioned this before in one of my speeches, but at that time I didn't have the reference. But tonight I want to actually mention the reference as well. This is from Surah Al-Shu'ara. Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, in this ayah, is he's explaining what his dream is. Now, we all have a dream. We all have something in mind where we're like, if we get this, then we're going to be happy. If we get this, we're going to be successful. What is the dream of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam? What does he want? Right? When he looks at things from his wise perspective, what is it that Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam is aspiring for? When he makes a dua, what is he praying for? He says, "O Allah, waj'al li lisana sidqin fil akhirin." Okay, now this is really interesting and very important. Literally, he's praying for a tongue. Lisan is a tongue, right? Lisana sidq. Lisana sidq is a tongue that allows you to speak truth. And he's asking God, he's saying that I want a tongue that will speak truth in the people who will come at the end of times, the people who will come later on. Now, they talk about like planning ahead, right? Having a far-sighted vision. Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam's vision goes way beyond what somebody who subscribed to the American dream would have. What are they looking at? They're looking at for themselves. They're like, okay, I want to own a property, I want to have a house, I want a good job, good income, be able to enjoy life, and then I'm gone. Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam is talking about something that goes to the end of time. He's saying that I want to be part of this mission, which is the divine mission of spreading the truth throughout the land. And what is that message of truth? It's the message of the oneness of God, the pure devotion of God and the pure life that comes along with it. So we're talking about like expanding our horizons and trying to think beyond the short nature of this world. When we're trying to think about how we're planning ahead when it comes to our futures, we need to take inspiration from this. Just recently, there was one youth who came to me, and I was very surprised. This particular young man, he hadn't really opened up to me before. But he said, I want to talk to you, and we set up a time. So he came to me and he said something, this is really mind-boggling, right? It really got me to think, right? He said that there's some time recently when this thought came to me, and this is a young man, he's in his 20s, born and raised in America, right? But he says that this thought came to me recently. He said that I want to do something with my life. I want to do something of value. So what is that thing he wants to do? He says that I have this desire that came to me as if it was planted in my heart. I want to raise kids. I want to raise children that I can present to Hazrat Ali and Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, and I want to be proud of these children that I present to them. And I was just blown away. I was like, here is somebody who, through the grace of Allah, he's taking these Quranic messages and he's applying them in his life. Who in his 20s is thinking about that type of thing? That I want to get to a point, and there's so many hurdles that he has to get through before he gets to that point. I mean, he wants to go to medical school and he wants to do this and this, but this is how far thinking he is. So tonight I want to focus on this, that if we are trying to create a vision for ourselves when it comes to being in this land, then what do we need to be wary about? What do we need to be careful about when we're trying to establish a generation in a country like this? And I want to take you to a hadith that we have. This hadith is very interesting, brothers and sisters. SubhanAllah, our hadith literature, our Quran has so much practical guidance for us. There was a time when our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was dispatching one of his companions by the name of Abdullah ibn Rawaha. He was dispatching Abdullah ibn Rawaha to go to a certain city in modern-day Jordan. And at that time, modern-day Jordan was like the Wild West. Okay, it was a godless land. It was a lawless land. It was a immoral land. So Abdullah Rawaha obviously is kind of worried, right? He's like, okay, I'm going to this place right here, right? I'm used to being part of this Muslim community. What am I supposed to do? So he goes to our Prophet and he says, command me to something that I can cherish from you. I want you to give me some advice that I'm going to hold dear to my heart. I'm going to be undertaking this incredible mission here, right? I want to make sure that I'm doing it properly. So what does the Prophet tell him? The Prophet tells him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the near future, you will be arriving in a land on which less sujood is performed. There's people don't do sajda in that land. People aren't worshiping God in that land. So when you go there, do plentiful sujood. Subhanallah. What is the Prophet telling him? He's telling him that you're going to a place where there is a community of people where their object of worship is other than your entity of worship. What that means is that you need to redouble your efforts. Otherwise, the environment is something that's going to have an effect on you. You got to be careful about that. So then when Abdullah gets that from the Prophet, he says that, Ya Rasulullah, I want something more. Give me another piece of advice. So what does the Prophet tell him? He says, be mindful of Allah. Have the dhikr of Allah with you. Dhikr of Allah doesn't just mean that you're saying the name of Allah, although that's something which is wonderful. But if somebody's in the habit of using their tongue to remember Allah, it's something which can bring about incredible blessings in their lives. But being mindful of Allah is being mindful, meaning that we carry ourselves in a way that we understand that we're in Allah's presence. So he says that be mindful of Allah, because if you do that, it's going to be a helper to you for whatever you seek. You're going to that place where it's a faithless land. What are the two things you have to do? Make sure that you redouble your efforts when it comes to worshiping Allah. Otherwise, you're going to be affected. Number two is that you have to be in the state of remembering Allah at all times. Then Abdullah gets up to leave. He's like, I got two golden nuggets of advice here. I'm going to act upon them. But then he pauses and he says that, Ya Rasulullah, Allah is odd in number, meaning that Allah is one, right? So give me, and he loves the odd number, right? It's a famous saying that, you know, Allah al-witr wa yuhibbul witr, right? So he says that, so the Prophet gives him one more piece of advice. He says that, O son of Rawaha, when you are unable to perform your duty, do not fail to do good at least once. Now, I don't want to focus on this third piece of advice there, because that has to do with things like exceptional circumstances, when you go and you're going to like places where you can't practice your faith. But even if you take these first 2 points, brothers and sisters, what is the advice being given? It's that if you are in an environment which is not founded on the worship of Allah, you have to be careful. To be careful for yourself, you have to be careful for your family. If you look at statistics, brothers and sisters, if you look at, for example, how many people in America are religious, who are committed to their faith, and for whom religion is very important from first generation to second generation. First generation meaning people who migrated here from a Muslim country, versus those who were born here to parents who were immigrants. Right? Just one stat. They say that in America, there is a 58% level of people who say religion is very important for us when they migrate here. But when you look at the second generation, you see that that number drops to 43%. And I haven't seen any study where they now track those same second generation to see what happens to their children. But I think if we look at anecdotally, meaning that if you look at the people that you know, I've been here for a long time. I was born and raised in this country. Many of the families that were here at that time when I was born, if you look at what happened to their children and the children of their children, you'll say that the story is not one of perfect success. Although there are shining examples of second generation and third generation individuals who are amazing. They're reciting Quran, they have love of Allah, they have love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. They're, changing things up for the whole community. They have wonderful ideas and so many things. They're activists, they're trying to, champion justice in this world and so many beautiful things. At the same time, we have a lot of casualties. So this is something that if we're thinking comprehensively, if our vision is long-term, if we're thinking beyond the typical American dream, we have to consider these factors. What are some of those factors that we need to consider? Tonight I want to draw attention to some of the things that personally I have seen that for whatever reason, maybe sometimes we're not aware. It's okay. Sometimes we just don't get it. We don't have a chance to think about. We're so busy doing our own thing, we don't get a chance to see what is it that we're struggling with. What are we competing with? For example, as an individual, right? I'm committed to, inshallah, follow the religion of Islam. I'm committed to leading a life of a Muslim life. But what are those things that are committed to trying to pull me away from that life of Islam? Or if I'm raising children in this country, right? I have a desire for them to be God-fearing, for them to be like righteous and so on and so forth, right? Well, I should be aware of what is the intention of the others who want to come and also they have a plan for my children and your children. And if I'm not aware of these things, I'm very naive. If I think that I can just coast along and not even know who my enemies are, I'm very naive. We have in hadith that, you might be sleeping, but your enemies aren't sleeping. They know who they are going after, and they're going to continue what they're doing. So I need to be aware of this. What are some of these factors that we're going to consider? First one I want to mention tonight is the role of media and entertainment. Everyone, needs that time off. They need that, downtime. And Islam encourages us to have halal downtime. Islam is a religion which is a balanced religion. There needs to be time for us to be entertained, and it helps us when it comes to worshiping Allah. But oftentimes, for whatever reason, we find that there's a lack of full awareness of the nature of what media can do to somebody. And here I want to cite a very interesting study that took place in the 1980s. It's something that when I came across it, I thought this was really interesting. There was a town in the Arctic of Canada where it was a town that was inhabited by the indigenous Canadian people. They lived a very traditional life. And there was a professor of anthropology who went to study that city and to see how people lived and to study their customs and all that. So he went there and he fully, lived with them. He kind of understood this is the way these people are. And they lived a very traditional life. At that time, in that culture, the Native American culture, they, for example, had rules about gender separation, right? They had rules about decency and kind of decent interaction and conduct. They had certain ways of doing things. They had a communal lifestyle. They used to support one another. Now, 2 years later, the same Canadian researcher, he goes back to that same town. And he now wants to see how things have changed. And you can find the study, it's available online. He wrote a book on it as well too. It's very interesting. He said that in these 2 years, there was two things that changed. Number one is that there was a satellite dish that was installed that was now broadcasting American television shows to all the households in that town, number one. Number two, he said that, as a second factor, not that, not something major, but he said that the students of the school in that town started to take trips down south. So they would see, like in down south, meaning like, because this was at the north of Canada, down south means like in Canadian like cities, like maybe like Montreal or Toronto or wherever. So they started to see what life was like outside of their own town. In 2 years, he says that I saw there was a profound transformation in the culture of this town. He said before, naturally, like for example, in the dining hall, you'd have the men here and the girls here. But now he says that I see frequently that there's a lot of interaction taking place. Before, there would be a very set traditional pattern for how people will get married. But now I see that, that has been broken. There's dating and all these other things. Before, there used to be a sense of strong sense of communality. They used to support one another. And now he says that I saw when they play hockey, for example, because in Canada they like to play hockey, right? So he said when they play hockey, I see that they're doing the same thing of like, this idea of like there being individuals who are stars, right? Like where they go and they do their brags and they try to like, kind of show off. He says, same thing I see here that I see, in the normal Canadian culture. And his thesis, what he says is that this is largely due to the influence of American television shows. And he actually mentions the shows, and he says that the type of interaction that they saw on TV is affecting their behavior. Brothers and sisters, those shows that he mentions were shows that were being played on American TV in the 1950s and the 1960s. What's happened since then? Right? You've heard this term called decoy before. Right? What is a decoy? Right? When you have a hunter who wants to hunt down like birds from the sky, for example, what does he do? Right? He can sit there with his gun and point it up in the sky and start shooting. Right? But it's kind of dangerous, isn't it? Imagine like you shoot a bullet in the sky and then you don't know where it's going to land when it goes down. Right? It's not a good idea, right? So what does he want to do? He needs to bring the birds down, right? But they're not going to come down if he calls them, please come so I can hunt you down. So what does he do? A hunter who wants to hunt birds, right? He makes use of a decoy. What is a decoy? He crafts a structure or an entity that looks like the bird that he wants to hunt down. And he puts that, it's called a decoy, he puts that decoy on the lake or on the pond so that the birds that are flying overhead, they see one of their own. For example, let's say it's a goose, right? So he makes a structure of a goose and he makes the goose on the pond. So they're like, okay, one of our fellow geese is on the pond, we're going to go in the pond as well too. And then they go down and he takes out his gun and that's his lunch and his dinner for a few weeks. Right? What is the strategy here? The strategy is that you come and you flock to those who are like yourself. What kind of profound transformation has happened in the type of media that is being beamed at all of us and our children and our families? Right? You see, for example, this concept of influencers who are, they look like you, they talk like you, they're your age, they're into the stuff that you're into. Right? It's something which is it's a new thing. Right? Before, it wasn't the case that you had to like, they would try to figure out, okay, well, at what time would they aim what program at what audience, right? And so they would put on a show thinking that they try to aim at the most people possible. So, for example, if you were somebody who wanted to watch cartoons, you would wake up on Saturday morning and you watch cartoons on Saturday morning. Now, if you want to watch cartoons, you don't have to wait till Saturday morning. Right? You can get whatever you want, however you want. You can get people your age telling you what kind of cartoons are good for you. It's something which is very significant. If you look at the companies that are out there, what are they trying to do? Okay, one of them, just as an example, right? One of the most familiar brands for our children that, is unfortunately, sometimes our children know better than the names, they know the names of these characters better than the names of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. It's Disney. What kind of company is Disney? What kind of values did they espouse? Any one of you who has been in a position of running a company or you're managing like at a high level in a company, you know that every company has certain core values and a mission. And when they make their decisions, they don't do so randomly. They do so on the basis of their mission and their values. This company that generations have entrusted their children to, generations have invested in, generations have brought their children up thinking, getting them to believe that this company is your friend. This company is there to support you. What kind of values do they espouse? Recently, if you look at the news, there was 2 high-level Disney executives, just in the last 2-3 years, 2 high-level Disney executives who both admitted that they have they actually mentioned with their own, they have an agenda to bring in queerness into those cartoons and those other shows that are aimed at the children. It's very clear. You can go and find the references here. Right? And you can see that creeping up, right? You can see it in terms of different things, hints, subtle. Sometimes it's open, sometimes it's subtle, right? I'll give you another data point, right? All of you probably have heard about this, but it's something worth pondering upon. This was a couple of decades ago, actually, where I think it was that the Senate or the White House, they had invited the Israeli prime minister at that time, or he was former at that time, but he came back, and now he's the current prime minister as well too, and apparently he's hospitalized. So anyway, he was talking about regime change. These people like to talk about regime change all the time, right? That's what they're all about. So he says that, in his speech there, he says that, okay, for Iraq, we need to go and we need to invade them and do this and that, okay? But what about Persia, right? So he says in his speech there, he says, for Persia, for those Iranians, you don't need to go and attack them. You don't even take a military campaign. He says that if you want to get rid of those mullahs, right, you want to get rid of that religious regime, all you got to do is you go and figure out a way to broadcast those American TV shows into the homes of the people. Show them what life is like in Beverly Hills 90210, right? And in that way, you're going to capture the hearts and minds of the people. Now, alhamdulillah, they weren't successful in doing that, right? But that was part of their agenda. And it's sometimes, it clearly speak that this is what our agenda is. We want to do things in this way. Brothers and sisters, there is an ayah in the Quran that I want to bring your attention to, where Allah Ta'ala describes what are the techniques of shaitan. Okay, and this applies to every one of us, right? I'm not talking about just of those of you who have children or grandchildren. No, every one of us. What is the technique of the shaitan? Allah Ta'ala says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ بِصَوْتِكَ." Instigate whomever of them you can with your voice. One of the ways that shaitan gets to us is through AV, through audio visual. Right? When we hear certain things, we hear themes, we hear ideas that are being told to us, right? We get affected by them. So we got to think about this. What are those messages that are being pumped to us? Right? Whether it be in popular music, whether it be in shows, whether it be through influencers, social media, cartoons, movies. What are those messages that are being pumped to us? What are they telling your children? Right? At least have the awareness. At least we should know. So many times, alhamdulillah, I've come across many families where they're very on top of it. They're exactly aware of what messages are coming. They have rules and they have restrictions, they have limits, they have good discussions with their children about the media they watch, and they're on top of it. But on the other hand, we have many times where you ask, well, so what do your children do? I'm not quite sure. They have an iPad and they have YouTube, and I'm not sure, but I'm happy because at that time I don't have to babysit them. And so it's like, okay, well, what's going on here, right? What about our responsibilities? Look at the ayah says, وَأَجْلِبْ عَلَيْهِمْ بِخَيْلِكَ وَرَجِلِكَ. Go and rally against them with your cavalry and your infantry. Shaitan has multiple means. Sometimes it's those soldiers which are very visible. Sometimes it's the infantry. Different means to be able to achieve his objectives. وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ وَعِدْهُمْ. Share with them in their wealth and their children. What is one of the jobs? What does shaitan want to do? Like, we have an enemy. Allah created us. It's not supposed to be a walk in the park, right? We're here for, it's called, the term that's used in hadith is the word jihad. Jihad means like a prolonged, intense, drawn out struggle. Achieving our dream is supposed to be a struggle. Inshallah, we have that dream which is expansive, like I talked about at the beginning of the lecture, where we're not limiting ourselves to something just with ourselves and our own personal success or our own understanding of what success is. But achieving our dream is going to require a struggle. That struggle means that we're going to have enemies. What is one of the job of our enemy? وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ is to come and somehow get involved with our wealth acquisition and with our children. Very clear in the Quran. Shaitan wants a part of our children, brothers and sisters. Right? This is what the Quran is telling us. One of the ways he does that is through the media. We have to be aware of this. Right? Sometimes you see that people of faith, people of conscientiousness of other faiths, they are much more aware of this than sometimes the people like Muslims are. Right? They have restrictions. They don't give social media to their children until they're very responsible and capable of doing it. You know that Facebook itself, that owns Instagram, recently they released an internal report where they admitted that they're aware of the mental health implications of their platform on young teenage girls. They themselves have measured this. They know that their platform has a direct cause linked to depression and anxiety in teenagers. But sometimes, the fact that they're saying it openly means that they know that there's people who aren't going to take notice of it, right? Because if it was something that would really cause their company to crash, they wouldn't have done that. But it's kind of like on those cigarette packets where they have a notice, they say that be aware this thing can cause you to, cigarettes kill, right? They actually say that, right? And mashallah, they're still doing like great sales, right? Like even they have pictures of what does to your lungs. They still sell the packets, right? Sometimes they create a type of platform that's so addictive that they know that they can say whatever is published about it, and people will still go and use it. So how do we deal with all of this? If we wanted to have a full conversation, we would talk about things like the schooling system. We would talk about things like, the influence of friends. But that's not, we don't have an unlimited amount of time. Just before we end up for tonight, I want to talk about something practical, which goes back to parenting style. A lot of times we're aware of this, and people are like, well, okay, so what are we supposed to do, right? We can't live in the dark ages, right? Everyone's this, we have this FOMO, we have this fear of missing out. What do we have to do, right? Brothers and sisters, typically in America, people have two types of parenting styles. And they're actually opposite from one another. And sometimes people oscillate between one and the other. Sometimes you have one parent who's applying one and another parent who's applying the other one. What are these two parenting styles? One of them is called permissive parenting. What is permissive parenting? My child gets to do whatever they want. As long as they don't bother me, right, I'm good, right? And they're good and they just do whatever they want. Number two is the parenting which is called authoritarian parenting, which is that my child must do everything that I want, right? They are to obey me in all circumstances. And when it comes to these types of issues, we find that, for example, let's say when it comes to controlling media access, social media, being careful about devices, right? Giving things at the right age, at the age appropriate type of things, right? Having discussions, we find that usually people are on opposite spectrum. One of them is that my child can do whatever they want. Second one is that I'll be very, very controlling and very domineering. Which one of them is correct? Actually, Islamic principles, right? We have a wonderful book called Children in the Quran and Sunnah, and in there, Marhum Ayatollah Ray Shahri, he says that we need to obviously not follow either of these. On one hand, we want to establish expectations and be very firm on these expectations. On the other hand, we also want to have a good sense of love and a good sense of appreciation and a good sense of tolerance as well. So it's important, we have our red lines for sure, but at the same time, we also have a good camaraderie, a good type of relationship with our children. But there's a third element, which he says, and many other scholars who work in this area, who have published in this area, who have guided us in this area, he says that the third pillar that is not talked about in Western styles of parenting. That if you want to establish a family, in fact, if you want to be an individual who's successful in this culture, you have to have this third pillar. What is that pillar? It's the pillar of karama, the dignity, the concept of dignity. If we're able to deal with ourselves, number one, and others with dignity, karama, then that's the success for actually being able to be effective in helping and be able to guide and do what's that process of tarbiyah and raising others. Now, I don't have time to open up this topic this evening, but inshallah, tomorrow as part of talking about lifestyle, I do want to mention this concept of karama. I also want to mention the importance of community. The last thing I'll say is this, that they say that in order to establish a strong identity, you need two things. Number one is you need what's called differentiation. Differentiation is that if you want to know who you are, you have to know how you're different from other people. Many times, parents make this mistake. They say that I want my child to be exactly like me, right? A chip off the old block, right? And they think that if their child is doing something different than them, then that's something which is wrong. Actually, it's one of the blessings of Allah that He made us in a way where we want to be different and unique. So part of establishing identity is this concept of differentiation. The second part of establishing our identity is something which is called affiliation, which is that we need to be part of a bigger thing. And this is super important. When we're talking about how can we possibly survive, when there's all these factors that are working against us, media, system, the secular system, let's say, the people who have an agenda, when they're working against us in our families, how can we survive? One of the ways is by making sure we have a strong identity. What do we need to do in order to have a strong identity? We need to have affiliation. And that's where the importance of community comes about. Alhamdulillah, we're blessed in this city to have community centers, one of them being this center. And I personally feel that we have a jewel here, an opportunity which is being underutilized and undervalued. Now, inshallah, tomorrow, one of the things I want to talk about is how we can prize the value of a community and what we can do to really maximize our use of the community facilities that we have. Inshallah, with the barakah wa salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Tonight, brothers and sisters, we have the very important and significant musibah of Hazrat Abu al-Fadl Abbas ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And I want to encourage all of you, especially our young people here, that please let us adopt the etiquette of mourners of the Ahlul Bayt. What is the etiquette of a mourner of the Ahlul Bayt? Part of it has to do with the way we dress, right? Part of it has to do with how we sit. Part of it has to do whether we're on our phones or not when the Majlis of Imam Hussein is going on. Part of it has to do with a very important thing, which is tabaki, which is that when the musibah is being recited, we should try to cry. And trying to cry means that we cast our head down and we relive this. These stories hit at our heart. If we're human beings, it should impact us. And if we're not able to bring tears to our eyes, then we should at least try. And in that effort of trying, inshallah, Jannah awaits us. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibn Ali al-Murtada. وابن فاطمة الزهراء صلى الله عليك أيها المقتول عطشانا. Peace and blessings be upon you, our beloved master, Imam Hussein, grandson of Rasulullah, son of Ali and Fatima. Peace and blessings be upon you and upon those noble companions who gave everything in your way, sacrificing their very lives for the sake of Allah and for the mission of the Ahlul Bayt. Peace and blessings be upon you and your blessed lips which were thirsty as you lay in the desert sand of Karbala by the banks of the Euphrates River. Traditionally, in an army, there was one person who was chosen to be the flag bearer. This choice was made very carefully. The reason is because whenever the army would become dispersed, whenever there was confusion, people would look for the flag and they would rally around the flag. The flag had to be given to the bravest and the strongest warrior, someone who would never falter, someone who at all costs would keep the flag flying high. Who was the flag bearer of Imam Hussein's army? It was the one who was known as Qamaru Bani Hashim, the moon of Banu Hashim. It was the bravest among them. It was the son of Ali, the brother of Hussein and Hassan, and the brother of Sayyida Zainab. It was Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas was known as the one who would sacrifice anything seeking the pleasure of Allah. He was the ultimate supporter of Imam Hussein. But he too had this desire and this thirst to show Allah how he could please him by sacrificing his very life in his way. On the day of Ashura, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas saw one by one the companions go to the battlefield. Then after them, one by one, the family members went to the battlefield. But he held back, seeking permission from Imam Hussein. Not that he did not want to go to the battlefield, not that he was scared of fighting the enemy, but he knew that for Imam Hussein, his presence was important. The flag bearer had to keep the flag flying high. But finally it comes the time when Abbas alayhi salam goes to Imam Hussein. He tells him, "Oh Abu Abdullah, will you give me permission to go to the battlefield? My chest has become constricted because of these people. I want to seek revenge for the sake of Allah." But when Imam Hussein looks at him, tears come to his eyes. He says, إِذَا مَضَيْتَ تَفَرَّقَ عَسْكَرِي. Oh Abbas, if you were to go, my army will be dispersed. What army was there at that time? There were only two soldiers who were standing, Imam Hussein and Abbas. But the value of Abbas was the value of an entire army. At that time, Imam Hussein must have heard the screams of the children, Al-Atash, Al-Atash, we are thirsty, we are thirsty. He tells Abbas, Abbas, go and fetch some water for these children. Abbas alayhi salam has a mission from his Imam. He gets on his horse, he takes his water skin, he goes to the enemy, he pleads to them. Don't you see these are children? What crime have they committed? You have an entire river of water. Just give us some water so we can give the water to the children. But Shimr la'natullahi alayhi says, "O son of Abu Turab, the dogs will drink from this water, but we will not give you access to that." Abbas alayhi salam will not forget his mission. He says, if you will not get the water, I will get the water myself. Several books mention that 4,000 men had been deployed to guard the riverbank. But this did not deter Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. He makes his way to the riverside. I don't know how, but somehow he finds himself at the edge of the river. He fills his water skin. He has a mission from his Imam. He could have taken some water at that time, but Abbas says that how can I drink water while my master is thirsty? Abbas alayhi salam faces the enemy again. They are between him and the tents of the Ahlul Bayt. They are between him and those thirsty children. He makes his way towards the tents, but the enemy is surrounding him. The arrows are flying. A man hides behind a tree. When he sees Abbas pass him, he comes out. He strikes. Abbas alayhi salam cries out, انقطعتم يميني فإني أحامي أبدا عن ديني وعن إمام صادق اليقين. That's the Nabi Sadiq al-Amini. He says, if you cut off my right hand, I will keep on defending the religion of the Prophet. I will not be deterred from my mission. Abbas alayhi salam continues. His right hand has been cut off. But then soon afterwards another man comes. He raises his sword. Abbas alayhi salam has now lost his left arm. Does this deter Abbas? No, he continues. Somehow he shifts the water skin to his chest. Abbas is continuing. The arrows are coming, but Abbas does not give up. The arrows are coming. One by one, they hit his body. Abbas is trying to protect the water skin, but what hands does he have to protect the water skin? Then one man comes with a club. He beats Abbas alayhi salam. Abbas falls to the ground. He cries out, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Abbas alayhi salam is now on the ground. The water will not reach the children. I don't know what scene Hussein alayhi salam saw when he came to Abbas, but when he saw Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam and what they did to him, he cries out, Alan inkasara dhahri وقلت حيلتي. My very backbone has been broken. My backbone has been broken. The flag has fallen down on the ground. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We ask Allah Ta'ala to accept this majlis from us and to count us among the true Azadaran of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We ask Allah Ta'ala to give us the strength and courage of Abbas alayhi salam, the type of loyalty that he had to his Imam. We ask for that type of loyalty to the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. We ask Allah Ta'ala concerning our youth and our children to keep them pure and to keep them on the path of Quran and the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. We ask Allah to hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time with the barakah wa salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.